Imagine a slate-gray morning on the banks of the Tyne. The mist clings to the river like a shroud, and the only sound is the distant cry of seagulls circling abandoned freighters. In that moment, Drew Pritchard steps onto a creaking gangplank, his steel-toed boots echoing against rotting timber. He's the unflappable face of Salvage Hunters, a man whose keen eye and sharper wit have turned forgotten junk into treasure. Yet today, whispers follow him beneath that cold dawn sky, a heartbreaking tragedy no camera lens will ever fully capture. Tonight, we peel back the layers of commercial bravado and delve into the private sorrow that changed everything for Britain's most daring antique dealer. For nearly 2 decades, viewers have watched Drew stalk through derelict mills, decaying barns, and windswept shipyards, hunting for relics that tell a story. He's charismatic, endlessly curious, and seemingly invincible. An explorer armed with a fistful of cash and an encyclopedic knowledge of cast iron and reclaimed mahogany. To the world, Drew embodied the ultimate salvage success story, transforming salvage yards into design empires, rescuing forgotten furniture from oblivion, and amassing a global following who tune in weekly for his clever banter and surprising finds. Yet behind the scenes, his trademark confidence masked a quiet dread, one that first stirred on a rainy afternoon outside a derelict textile factory, long before the cameras rolled. Drew's earliest memories of salvage date back to childhood weekends spent rummaging through his grandfather's railway workshops. The elder Pritchard taught him how to tell a 19th-century railway lantern from a modern replica, seeded in him a reverence for objects forged by hand. As a scrappy kid in Wrexham, Wales, he learned that value isn't always measured in pounds sterling, but in provenance, the stories embedded in rust and grain. By 18, Drew was hunting sideboards and architectural oddities at local car boot sales. He'd load them onto his battered Ford Transit van and sell them at antique fairs, pocketing enough to fund his art school education. Soon, his reputation for spotting hidden gems spread beyond local markets, drawing the attention of international dealers. In 2011, a chance meeting with a production scout changed everything. A film crew followed him into a crumbling Liverpool dock warehouse, where he uncovered a set of Victorian wrought iron gates destined for the scrap heap. His off-the-cuff remarks, equal parts wit and wisdom, sparked the idea for Salvage Hunters. When the show debuted in 2012, audiences were captivated. Here was a man who made salvaging seem as thrilling as hunting for buried treasure. Each episode blended historical detours, Drew explaining how an oak church pew survived the Blitz, with pulse-quickening auctions and near misses at scrapyard gates. His catchphrase, "Here we go," became synonymous with the adrenaline rush of discovery. But beneath the surface excitement, Drew carried a shadow he seldom spoke of. It began the day he ventured alone into a disused cotton mill outside Manchester, a place said to be haunted by the ghosts of child laborers. He was inspecting a giant cast-iron pulley wheel when the rusted metal snapped. The wheel crashed to the concrete floor, sending shockwaves through his arms and knocking him off balance. He hit the ground with a sickening thud, pain radiating from his shoulder to his spine. Cameras weren't rolling. No producer was there to yell cut. He lay in the echoing emptiness, fear and adrenaline battling beneath the surface. He managed to stagger out, clutching the injured limb, promising himself he'd laugh it off in tomorrow's shoot. But the damage was more serious than he allowed anyone to know. That fracture marked the first crack in his armor. Painkillers became his hidden arsenal, and stiff mornings felt like betrayals against his own body. He learned to mask his agony with clipped humor, joking about dodgy ankles, and calling the injury a bit of a twinge. Yet at night, when the lights dimmed and the silence crept in, he felt the severity of what happened that day. He realized his passion for salvage carried real risks: falling debris, unstable floors, heavy lifting, with no stunt crews or safety nets. More ominously, he wondered whether his relentless pursuit of the perfect find was pushing him toward a breakdown he couldn't salvage. As he climbed back into his transit for another salvage run, he vowed never to let viewers, or even his closest friends, witness the raw fear that gripped him on that mill floor. He became both hunter and hunted, scanning for antiques while scanning his own pulse for signs of collapse. The incident haunted his dreams, replaying in nightmares of falling steel and grinding machinery. Yet he pressed on, driven by instinct and a stubborn refusal to admit vulnerability. To the world, Drew Pritchard remained unshakable, until the day the cameras captured him locking himself in a hotel bathroom, tears tracing tracks down his cheeks as the pain finally broke through. Tonight, we'll trace Drew's journey from that fateful mill accident through the hidden corridors of his mind. We'll hear from those closest to him, the crew members who found the bathroom door locked, the salvage partners who noticed he no longer rose at dawn with the same grin. We'll explore how this single incident, buried beneath laughter and bids, reshaped his career, his relationships, and his outlook on life. And finally, we'll witness the heartbreaking revelation he shared with his wife and son, a confession so raw it changed everything he thought he knew about strength and fame. The fracture in his shoulder had healed, but the fracture in his heart only widened with time. After that fateful mill incident, Drew threw himself deeper into work, chasing rushes of adrenaline to silence the ache. Yet every triumph, rescuing an ornate fireplace mantle or beating a rival at auction, brought a fleeting high before despair slammed back in. Painkillers dulled the physical sting, but nothing numbed the guilt he carried from that morning spent lying alone on a concrete floor. At home, the cost of his silence became painfully clear. His wife, Charlotte, once his anchor through every uprooted barn and salvage yard, watched him transform. Mornings when he'd normally share coffee and market leads, he now stumbled into the kitchen, eyes glassy, voice distant. Their son, Milo, barely 9, asked why Daddy flinched when he hugged him. Charlotte offered gentle reassurances, but behind closed doors, she wept for the man she married, the man she hardly recognized. She told friends later, "He looked at me with the same love, but it was laced with pain I couldn't touch." Seeking escape, Drew threw himself into an ambitious project, renovating a derelict naval ship moored off the Welsh coast. Cameras captured his triumphant grin as he navigated rusted hatches and ballroom panels stripped by salt spray. But behind the scenes, he battled vertigo from a lingering inner ear injury, and those late-night pacing sessions in his cabin grew longer. His crew noticed he no longer joined them for banter over mugs of tea. He retreated into solitude, scrawling notes about structural weaknesses and salvage costs in a battered notebook that leaked ink onto his calloused hands. Then came the unthinkable. Sam Hughes, Drew's longtime friend and chief assistant, the man who'd taught him to distinguish a cast-iron radiator from a vintage heater, perished in a collapse aboard that very ship. It was a mist-shrouded dawn when Sam slipped into a lower hold to assess damage to the hull. Drew was above decks, chalking up scupper repairs, oblivious to the silent crisis unfolding below. A rotten beam gave way, pinning Sam against the bulkhead. By the time Drew descended into the hold, the lights had flickered out and Sam's breathing had already slowed. Doctors ruled it an accident, a tragic misstep amid a decaying vessel. But to Drew, it felt like a verdict. When the news reached him, he was in London negotiating a deal to source 18th-century chandeliers for a high-profile client. The broker's voice crackled through his earpiece while his world imploded. Instantly hung over from grief, he stumbled through the meeting, forcing polite nods and dull ahas. The deal closed, but he no longer cared about the profit margin. He hung up, stumbled into the nearest pub, and shut himself in a restroom stall. Cell phone lights streamed through the keyhole, producers desperate for a status update. But he locked the door and let the tears fall. The cameras were rolling outside, but they captured nothing more than his absence. In the days that followed, production came to a halt. Drew refused to return until the footage from that shipwreck shoot was spliced out. He spent hours by Sam's graveside, flicking gravel with shoe tips, replaying every memory. Sam's booming laugh as they hauled steel beams, his patience teaching Drew the subtle hum of a well-oiled gear mechanism, the pride in his eyes when a salvage turned into a museum showcase. Charlotte found him there at dawn, sitting alone on the grass. She slipped into the pew beside him, her shoulder brushing his. He didn't speak. He simply let her presence bear the weight of his sorrow. Back on set, the mood had shifted. Crew members whispered in corners, glancing at Drew with hesitant sympathy. The banter that once filled scrapyard shoots was muted. Salvage operations continued, but the spark had dimmed. Even Drew's signature, "Here we go," sounded hollow. The network, sensing ratings vulnerability, pressed for a special episode honoring Sam. Drew agreed, but refused to film. He granted only audio interviews, his voice hoarse with emotion as he shared memories of his friend. Producers cut the tribute with silent clips, Sam's hands patting a rescued stone gargoyle, his grin dappled under yard lights. The segment aired with somber music and black and white stills. Yet the public touching moment belied the private tempest. Charlotte recalls nights when Drew would wander the salvage yard alone, flashlight in hand, searching for comfort in the detritus. He confessed to her that he felt cursed, that by saving history, he'd somehow lost his best friend. When Milo asked why Daddy looked sad in family photos, Drew sat on his son's bed and told him gently, "Sometimes grown-ups carry storms inside." That honesty, fragile as it was, cracked a door open. Charlotte and Drew attended grief counseling together, learning to navigate loss and rebuild trust. Milo drew pictures of his father smiling again, clinging to hope amid the gloom. Today, Drew carries Sam's absence like a tempered weight, not a burden that sinks him, but a reminder of life's fragility. He's restructured his salvage empire to include safer protocols, honoring Sam's memory by preventing similar accidents. He's slower to volunteer for dangerous inspections, delegating to younger colleagues under his watchful eye. And he's learned that true resilience isn't born from silencing pain, but from sharing it, through tears in a hotel bathroom, confessions to his family, and the small act of asking for help. This tragedy transformed the unflappable salvage hunter into a man who salvages more than antiques. He salvages connections, empathy, and the courage to face heartbreak head-on. In the next section, we'll explore how Drew's journey through grief reshaped his approach to salvage and life itself, leading to an unexpected renaissance both on and off camera. In the weeks after Sam's funeral, Drew returned to the salvage yard with a new purpose pulsing through his veins. Where once he had moved through decaying barns like a lone wolf, he now enlisted a team of close friends and family to share the load. He reconfigured the yard into clearly marked zones with reinforced steel supports and non-slip walkways. Safety harnesses hung from overhead beams like lifelines, reminding everyone that the true treasure was human life itself. When he led a group through the revamped site, he no longer charged in with a breathless, "Here we go." Instead, he paused to ensure every volunteer had the protective gear they needed, handing out gloves and hard hats with the solemnity of a captain distributing life jackets. That shift rippled outward into his work on camera. In the next season of Salvage Hunters, viewers noticed subtle yet profound changes. The opening scenes lingered not on Drew's swagger, but on his quiet interactions, encouraging crew members to test load-bearing chains, complimenting a young apprentice when she correctly identified a 1930s industrial lamp. When he discovered a rare set of cast iron brackets in a Welsh barn, he smiled at his assistant, not for the camera's sake, but because he genuinely felt pride in their teamwork. The show embraced these moments, weaving them seamlessly into the narrative so that rescue operations and heartfelt pep talks felt equally vital to the story. Off-screen, he launched a mentorship program for aspiring salvage hunters. Partnering with technical colleges, he offered apprenticeships to students who lacked resources to fund their own tools. Each student received a starter kit, safety gear, basic hand tools, and Drew's own refurbished rolling vise embossed with his signature. Classroom lectures had him describing the thrill of unearthing a rare floorboard from a 19th century theater, balanced with cautionary tales about underscored dangers, weakened beams, unpredictable weather, and the hidden rust that could give way at a moment's notice. These sessions ended with hands-on workshops at his yard, where Drew walked beside novices as they lifted heavy objects, coaxed them into asking questions, and laughed with them when a misplaced wrench clanged to the ground. He also reimagined the business model. Instead of bidding solely for profit, Drew began setting aside a portion of each find for charitable auctions. A salvaged Gothic paneled door sold at a London gallery would carry a note. £50 from your purchase supports the Sam Hughes Foundation, which funds safety equipment for small-scale heritage restorations. In 3 months, these auctions raised tens of thousands of pounds, creating a living tribute to the friend he lost. At events, Drew spoke not about profit margins, but about the lives improved through protective harnesses and renewed apprenticeships, turning every beating gavel into an echo of collective compassion. This philanthropic bent culminated in a special spin-off, Salvage Hunters, Legacy. In each episode, Drew traveled to historical sites at risk of collapse, partnering with local communities to salvage fragments that could be repurposed. One poignant installment found him in a Cornish fishing village, where a collapsed warehouse threatened to erase generations of maritime history. He worked alongside villagers, salvaging antique ship fittings while listening to their family stories. When he finally installed recovered pieces in a community center, a plaque read, "In memory of Sam Hughes, whose spirit taught us to treasure both objects and one another." The applause from that crowd felt more genuine than any studio audience Matthew Bainton or Kate Bliss could muster. At home, Drew opened up to Charlotte and Milo in ways he never had before. He invited his son on site visits, explaining the mechanics of pulleys and the importance of solid foundations, then pausing to ask how Milo was really doing at school. Milo confessed he'd been anxious about making new friends. Drew listened, shelved a rusted chandelier bracket, and promised they'd host a salvage-themed birthday party where Milo could invite classmates into the dusty barnyard. The two spent afternoons crafting mini-rescue missions with toy trucks and broken dollhouse chairs, laughter echoing off weathered brick. In those moments, Drew realized that rebuilding a relationship was just as important as rebuilding a barn roof. His family life mirrored the repaired structures he championed. The Pritchards hosted weekend open houses at the yard, inviting neighbors for barbecues and yard sales featuring safe, affordable pieces that once faced the crusher. Visitors strolled among stacks of salvaged wood and gleaming metalwork, while Drew narrated each item's history. An antique pulpit from a closed chapel, iron gutter spouts from a demolished schoolhouse, instilling a sense of shared heritage. Word spread, and soon local newspapers ran features titled "Salvage for Souls," how a town found community in history's remnants. Through these gatherings, Drew resurrected more than architectural fragments. He revived the bonds of friendship and trust. Meanwhile, the production team documented his transformation with a discreet cinema verite approach. No voiceover salesman pitches, just raw footage of Drew wiping sweat from his brow, troubleshooting a snapped steel beam, or resting under a solitary beam of sunlight that pierced through boarded-up windows. Intercut with home videos of Milo's impromptu puppet shows among toolboxes, the footage painted a portrait of a man rediscovering joy through service. When that season aired, critics praised the emotional depth. Salvage Hunters has evolved from treasure hunting spectacle into a reflection on resilience, one review noted. Perhaps the most enduring change came in Drew's own philosophy. He no longer defined success by the rarity of a find or the sparkle in a buyer's eye. Instead, he measured it by the laughter ringing out at a community workshop, the safety harness dangling and used because everyone felt protected, the gratitude in a student's phone call reporting their first paid salvage gig. His letters to Sam, once bound in dusty crates, now lay alongside thank you cards from apprentices and local officials. Each card bore a scribbled line. "Your guidance saved more than my career. It saved my belief in what I could become." In time, Drew Pritchard, salvage hunter extraordinaire, relearned how to salvage himself. By embracing vulnerability, he turned tragedy into a blueprint for empathy and action. The barn floors he reinforced under stark floodlights became symbols of newfound stability. The tools he distributed became extensions of care rather than commerce. And as he gazed across the yard one mist-clad dawn, he no longer felt hunted by ghosts of that mill floor. Instead, he felt surrounded by a community he helped forge, united by shared purpose and the belief that even broken things and broken people can find new life when handled with care. From that turning point onward, every project Drew undertook carried the imprint of Sam's memory and the lessons learned from loss. In one of the season's most memorable episodes, he traveled to a decrepit Victorian asylum in northern England, where activists had fought for years to preserve its history. The roof was caving in, windows shattered, corridors echoing with forgotten footsteps, and, behind locked doors, equine stables strewn with broken harnesses. To the untrained eye, it was a salvage nightmare. But Drew saw an opportunity to merge history, safety, and community. He arrived flanked by his crew, all equipped with harnesses and headlamps glinting in the dusk. Before setting foot inside, He gathered everyone in a tight circle. No quips this time, only a solemn reminder. Be vigilant. We owe our friend that. Then, methodically, they advanced. Drew led the way, tracing a finger along cracked skirting boards and tapping on beams to detect hollow spots. Where once he might have shrugged at a bent steel girder, now he placed support jacks underneath, reinforcing the weight above them before even lifting a single artifact. Inside the chapel wing, he uncovered a set of hand-painted pew and salvage from the 1870s. Rusty nail heads threatened to tear fabric, but instead of prying them loose alone, Drew called for Charlotte and Milo, inviting them onto the stage of history. As the camera panned out, the family united to lift the fragile pieces, draping protective blankets over them. It was the first time viewers saw his son and wife featured on screen, not as background figures, but as active partners in the salvage process. The moment captured a profound shift. Salvage had become a family mission of care, not merely a spectacle. That episode became a watershed. Fans flooded social media with praise for Drew's new approach. Comments like "heart in every hall" and "salvage with soul" trended across platforms. Ratings climbed even higher, disproving critics who feared that veering from daredevil antics would alienate audiences. Instead, viewers responded to authenticity and ethics. The show's producers took note, expanding the series to include community collaborations, where local volunteers joined in safe dismantling and restoration workshops. Across 3 continents, from a crumbling Queensland sugar mill to a deserted Ontario train depot, Drew's team introduced thousands of novices to hazard awareness and preservation skills, turning each shoot into a community event rather than a one-man treasure hunt. Off-camera, the ripple effects fueled new charitable arms. The Sam Hughes Foundation morphed into a broader nonprofit, the Heritage and Humanity Trust, dedicated to funding safety training, mental health support for tradespeople, and grants for historic site conservators. Drew appeared at gala fundraisers wearing a lapel pin shaped like interlocked gears, symbolizing unity. Journalists dubbed him Britain's salvage statesman, a title he accepted humbly, acknowledging that his crusade had outgrown the television lens. He credited every donor, every volunteer, for turning personal tragedy into collective triumph. Underneath these public successes, Drew continued wrestling with inner turmoil. It surfaced unexpectedly during a high-profile live auction in London, where he'd consigned a carved oak mantelpiece from a demolished stately home. As the hammer fell and a bidder paid a record sum, the roar of approval filled the hall. But backstage, Drew felt a pang of dissonance, celebration mixed with the ache of emptiness. He stepped into a dim corridor, punching out a voicemail to Charlotte. "I miss you. I think I'll come home tonight." That candid confession, captured on a crew mic left unmuted, became an unplanned but moving clip in the season finale, his vulnerability standing in sharp contrast to the bravado viewers had come to expect. Charlotte and Milo greeted him at home with open arms, transforming the salvaged oak panels into the centerpiece of their living room fireplace. As hearth flames danced, Drew realized that the true value of any restored object was not its auction price, but its ability to anchor loved ones, his family, his crew, and the countless apprentices uplifted by his programs. That insight reshaped his final mission, to build a legacy that outlasted television seasons and auction blocks. In that spirit, he launched Salvage School, an annual week-long academy hosted at his yard. Each cohort accepted only 20 students, selected through essays describing how they'd use salvage techniques to benefit communities, whether restoring school desks, building animal shelters, or revitalizing local venues. Applications poured in from around the globe, with stories of healing, heritage, and hope woven through every submission. Drew read them personally, tears welling as he realized how profoundly his own journey had inspired others to confront adversity with creativity. As the Academy's inaugural session concluded, graduating students presented projects alongside before and after displays. Barn doors repurposed into classroom chalkboards, corroded metal beams turned into community garden pergolas. The final ceremony ended not with applause, but with a moment of silent reflection as Drew recited Sam's favorite line. "Sometimes the best treasure is simply making something whole again." In that silence, the audience felt the full weight of his transformation, from solitary hunter to community steward, from grief-stricken soul to catalyst for collective restoration. Looking out over the sea air breeze rustling through scaffold tarps and scaffolding, Drew Pritchard understood what the tragedy had truly taught him, that salvaging the past was only part of the journey. The greater challenge and greater reward lay in salvaging the present, hearts, hopes, and human connections. As the final shot faded to black, viewers knew they'd witnessed more than a TV episode. They'd glimpsed the unfolding redesign of a life rebuilt from the wreckage, guided by compassion, guided by care, and always mindful of the friend whose absence had changed everything. The dawn air carried a chill, but Drew Pritchard felt a warmth pulsing through him as he unlocked the gates to his salvage yard for the first morning of the new Resilience and Restoration workshop. 20 participants, survivors of workplace injuries, veterans struggling with PTSD, young apprentices haunted by self-doubt, waited in a semicircle beneath the iron archway he'd salvaged from a demolished mill. Each wore sturdy boots and safety vests, but their eyes betrayed a different vulnerability, the ache of past trauma, the tension of battles fought alone. As Drew stepped forward, he discarded his usual bravado and spoke not as a celebrity, but as a fellow survivor. "Today," he said quietly, "we salvage more than timber and metal. We salvage ourselves." That single sentence marked a profound shift. Over the next 5 days, the participants learned to reinforce beams and cast safety lines. They also learned to recognize panic triggers, to breathe through flashbacks, and to lean on each other when memories threatened to overwhelm. Each morning began with a brief sharing circle. Tasks as simple as splitting reclaimed oak took on symbolic weight as attendees recounted why they'd come. Loss of a colleague, years of isolation, nightmares of falling debris. By noon, laughter rang out across the yard as they worked in pairs, guiding each other through mechanical challenges and offering quiet reassurance when frustration flared. One participant, a former stonemason named Claire, described how a collapsed wall had ended her career and nearly taken her will to live. By day 3, tears brimmed in her eyes as she and her partner hoisted a reclaimed sandstone lintel into place. Drew watched from the edge of the courtyard, moved by the sight of her steady hands and determined smile. Later, he invited Claire to join him for tea, where she confessed that the act of rebuilding a broken structure taught her that rebuilding herself was possible. In that moment, Drew recognized that his true legacy lay not in auctions or ratings, but in the quiet alchemy of hope sparked in other hearts. News of the workshop spread quickly through trade magazines and mental health networks. Within weeks, other salvage yards contacted Drew, asking for guidance on how to incorporate similar resilience programs. He shared his curriculum freely, offering to consult on safety protocols and trauma-informed team-building exercises. Even rival dealers, once skeptical of sentiment in a profession built on grit, emailed to express gratitude when attendees reported fewer accidents and improved morale. The salvage industry, long defined by risk and one-upmanship, began to pivot toward collective care and accountability, reframing hunter as steward of both history and human well-being. Commissioners in Cardiff and Liverpool took note, inviting Drew to testify at regional heritage forums about the intersection of preservation and practitioners' mental health. He presented data from anonymous surveys showing reduced anxiety among workshop graduates and testimonials describing renewed purpose. His unpolished sincerity resonated. Here was a television personality who refused to treat grief as a liability, instead placing it at the heart of his methodology. Lawmakers drafted guidelines recommending mandatory safety briefings that included mental health check-ins before high-risk operations. Drew's name became synonymous with a movement that transcended television, one that safeguarded bodies and minds alike. Back in the editing suite, producers recognized that audiences craved this deeper layer of storytelling. The upcoming season of Salvage Hunters would feature regular segments highlighting the resilience workshops, intercut with real-time scenes of attendees confronting fear and learning to ask for help. Instead of the fast-paced montage of adrenaline-fueled bids, episodes would linger on moments of quiet breakthrough. A veteran's hands trembling as he steadies a beam overhead, a young apprentice's voice cracking as she shares her story of burnout. Each segment would conclude with the workshop's mantra, "We rebuild more than wood." Charlotte and Milo became fixtures on these episodes, not as decorative cameos, but as partners in the mission. Charlotte, drawing on her background in social work, led mindfulness exercises at sunrise. Milo, now a teenager, oversaw inventory of donated tools, offering peers a listening ear when they arrived with personal burdens heavier than any iron girder. Their family dynamics flowed into view. A father and son laughing over a spilled cup of tea, a mother gently guiding participants through grounding techniques, a family united by service. Fans responded enthusiastically, flooding social channels with messages like, "Your family's heart shines through every hall." As Drew prepared for the workshop's final ceremony, an emotional send-off where participants would receive certificates and share reflections, he took a private moment by Sam's memorial bench. He traced the carved initials and whispered, "We did it, mate. We made it matter." Nearby, a plaque unveiled the Heritage and Humanity Trust's new fellowship program, funding qualified attendees to launch their own community salvage initiatives. With a soft thumbs up to the empty air, Drew turned toward the yard where laughter and hammering echoed in tandem. That day, as clip reels from the workshop aired at the series premiere, ratings soared and critics lauded the show's evolution. Headlines read, "Salvage Hunters, channeling grit into grace," and Drew Pritchard, from antique aficionado to healer of hearts. Yet amidst the acclaim, Drew kept his focus on the faces of the workshop graduates beaming on the big screen, their pride more powerful than any hammer strike. For him, the real triumph lay in the knowledge that every salvaged beam and every shared story would ripple outward, inspiring others to rebuild what feels broken, be it a crumbling barn or a fractured spirit. And so, as we near the final chapter of Drew Pritchard's heartbreaking and ultimately inspiring journey, we'll explore how he plans to scale this mission globally, transforming salvage yards on every continent into sanctuaries of healing and human connection. With the echoes of our inaugural Resilience Workshop still resonating in the crisp Welsh dawn, Drew Pritchard stood before a cairn of reclaimed beams and lanterns, contemplating the next frontier. He envisioned a global coalition of salvage sanctuaries, each one a fusion of heritage conservation and human healing. Partnering with leaders in Nairobi, Mumbai, Buenos Aires, Sydney, Reykjavik, Trondheim, Vancouver, and 4 additional pilot cities, he vowed to transform crumbling sites into safe havens where communities could reclaim both their stories and their strength. The press dubbed it Drew's boldest expedition yet, while NGOs and government agencies clamored for details. How could a salvage yard bridge cultural divides, mend collective wounds, and inspire hope around the world? Drew's answer was unwavering. We salvage history to salvage ourselves, bolstered by digital archives, VR planning simulations, and resilient scholarships ensuring every sanctuary had the resources to endure. In Nairobi, beneath an amber sunrise, Drew met artisans and eviction survivors determined to preserve their past amid rapid urban change. Together, they entered a derelict textile mill slated for demolition. Former factory workers and displaced residents gathered in a circle to share their loss. Evicted homes, vanished markets, and broken promises, before lifting rusted looms and corroded gears onto modular platforms. Guided by Drew's mentorship, they repurposed these relics into vibrant public sculptures that embodied resilience. Thousands attended the unveiling, celebrating a community reborn through art. Thousands of miles east in Mumbai, monsoon-swollen docks languished under layers of silt and sorrow. Drew collaborated with dockworkers who'd lost colleagues to underwater hazards, teaching them water-resistant restoration techniques, combining European safety polymers and local craftsmanship. When repaired gates swung open to a revitalized bazaar, villagers danced beneath strings of salvaged lanterns, proving that healing often shines brightest in celebration. In Buenos Aires, Drew partnered with tango dancers and film archivists to rescue nitrate film reels from a crumbling cinema. Amid peeling murals, they digitized century-old footage and repurposed stage planks into kinetic installations. Youth choreographed routines that projected restored clips onto salvaged film canisters, merging past and present in a single performance. Social media erupted as crowds gathered beneath flickering images, united by nostalgia and innovation. Across the Indian Ocean in Sydney, Coastal volunteers rallied to fortify rotting wharf timbers besieged by waves. Marine biologists guided eco-friendly epoxy applications, while indigenous elders led dawn ceremonies honoring ancestral shorelines. The team installed interpretive panels with QR codes linking to oral histories, inviting visitors to explore the reef's delicate ecosystem and the community's cultural roots. In each sanctuary, Salvage became a catalyst for environmental stewardship and cross-generational dialogue. In Reykjavik's frigid fjords, Drew introduced cutting-edge VR to map unsafe shipyards without endangering lives. Apprentices donned headsets to navigate digital twins of rusting hulls, plotting safe extraction routes pixel by pixel. These virtual blueprints then informed real-world restorations, preventing collapses that once cost lives. Meanwhile, his team built a comprehensive online portal, Salvage Nexus, linking every sanctuary in real time. The platform offered interactive maps, safety manuals translated into 15 languages, live-streamed workshops, and resilience scholarships funded by microdonations. Within days, 500,000 users logged on from every time zone, sharing stories of empowerment and cross-cultural exchange. Through digital solidarity, individual griefs fused into a global network of care, proving that even the most remote salvage site could become a classroom, a sanctuary, and a beacon of collective renewal. Back in Wales, Charlotte and Milo became the heartbeat of this expanding mission. Each evening, from their cozy farmhouse study, they hosted live Q&A sessions with sanctuary coordinators spanning 6 continents. Milo, now nearly 17, spoke candidly about the importance of mental health check-ins before every salvage expedition, drawing praise from psychologists and global youth forums. Charlotte, leveraging her social work background, designed trauma-informed curriculum modules ensuring that every volunteer learned to recognize signs of burnout among teammates. Their conversations reached tens of thousands of viewers, fostering a sense of shared purpose across language barriers. When a pilot team in Vancouver posted a video deployment of recycled boat planks into a homeless shelter floor, Milo beamed on camera. This is what happens when you salvage hearts and homes together. As twilight settled over his original Welsh yard, Drew walked past the memorial bench etched with Sam Hughes's initials. He paused under a lantern salvaged from the first sanctuary's gates, letting its warm glow cast reassuring shadows. In his final journal entry of the journey, he wrote, "A single accident once threatened to end me, but it became the force that reshaped the world. From derelict mills to VR shipyards, we've learned that every beam we lift and every hand we hold restores more than structures. It rebuilds communities and the human spirit. Our global network proves one truth. No matter how broken the past may seem, together we salvage what matters most." And with those words, the mantle of Salvage Hunter passed from one life to countless others, each ready to carry the torch of hope where it is needed most.